Thank you, Dr. Hunter, for that presentation on petroleum regulation, and it really is a topic that's very close to us and will be into the future, and I'm sure it'll generate quite a lot of questions in the panel session later on. So in continuing with the topic of natural resource security, our next speaker has a track record of bringing onshore gas company, senior executives, landholders, heads of government and advocacy groups to the table and leading open and frank discussions. John Cotter, Chairman of Gasfields Commission Queensland, works with his fellow commissioners to manage and improve sustainable coexistence among rural landholders, regional communities and the onshore gas industry in Queensland. Mr. Cotter is a landowner and beef producer with more than 30 years' experience. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Cotter to the stage.
Thank you very much, Michael. To President Tom and CEO Tracy, thank you very much for the invitation. I think I was up in Darwin a while back and talking to some government people, and certainly was pretty impressed with the way this organisation was acting in a very mature and adult way as to dealing with these issues, and I congratulate you for that. To other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, can I just say from the outset, I would never come or never accept an invitation with the precincts that I was telling you how to do business. That's not the way, but I would certainly like to give you a few thoughts on the way and the hard road we've come that might make your life easier going forward. But certainly I am absolutely not here about telling you how or how you should not do things. That's something you will develop over time, and you will develop what's relevant and best for you and your communities. But can I just say, coexistence between rural and resource industries is about finding the right balance. Very topical for your conference. Here in the Territory, you're about the beginning of developing a shale gas industry. As landowners, the journey you embark on and the issues you will be grappling with won't be that different from what we faced in rural Queensland when the coal seam gas industry emerged about a decade ago. Today I'd like to share with you some of the lessons we've learned out of hard-won battles. To understand these lessons, for landowners and resource companies about avoiding conflict, I'd like to go back to the beginning. In Queensland, we had an unconventional gas industry for many decades. It was always largely out of sight in western areas around Roma and across the Cooper Basin in the far southwest. In 2008, the unconventional gas industry got going in the Surat Basin in southern Queensland, a much highly populated and a more intensively farmed area. I was flying over that region when I was Ag Force President at the time, and I was struck by the number of wells popping up and, more importantly, the evaporation ponds that was dotted across the land. This is in 2008-09. Queensland had no land access code or adequate regulatory framework in place for the gas industry. We had limited information was available from gas companies about their activities. Little information was available on the science or the environmental impacts, especially the critical issues such as groundwater. Rural businesses in regional communities found their local towns were filling up with gas workers decked out in fluoro outfits, driving white Toyotas with flags on them. Nobody knew what was coming. Consequently, the trust levels were extremely low between the gas industry and the landowners, and this was made worse by gas companies simply turning up at landowners' gate and demanding entry. By 2010, tensions across the community had reached a breaking point. Hundreds of rural landowners and local residents came out to protest at a rally at Cecil Plains and in April of that year, and a community cabinet meeting in Roma in July. Also at that time, Queensland rural towns had been going through a steady decline in population and job opportunities. The new onshore gas industry provided a possible opportunity to help rebuild these towns and their local economies economies. But it was going nowhere unless some of these conflicts between the various groups could be resolved. By using my background and experience of 30 years of rural advocacy in Queensland, I saw the potential to improve coexistence between both sectors. From 2010 to 2012, I chaired a group of rural landowners, gas company representatives, i.e. the CEOs, the government DGs, known as the Surat Basin Engagement Group. The aim of this group, established by the government at the time, was to get all parties around one table. With a better understanding of each other, we could look for mutually beneficial solutions to the challenges we faced. Investing time and effort into our relationships, we started to find a way forward to building a bit of trust and a bit of respect. In early 2012, the government of the day established the formal engagement body that I now chair, known as the Gasfields Commission. In April of that year, I was appointed as chair, and my first task was to work with the government to develop legislation to establish the Commission as an independent statutory body. It was something that I don't think has ever been done in Queensland before, where the government anointed a body and then asked them to build the legislation around it, and it was particularly unique in the way it was done. The Queensland Parliament passed that legislation in April 2013, and it came into being on 1 July 13, not quite 3 years ago. The Commission has broad functions and powers, being reviewing the effectiveness of legislation and regulation, obtaining and publishing factual information, convening parties for the purpose of resolving issues, promoting scientific research to address knowledge gaps, and making recommendations to government and industry about any of the above. To capture these functions, we created 6 portfolios which focus on a priority area and is led by a part-time commissioner with the relevant skills and experience. These areas were land access, water and salt management, science and research, local government and infrastructure, community and business, and gas industry development. I'll just quickly touch on a bit on each one. Land access was about levelling the playing field in land access negotiations between rural landowners and onshore gas proponents to get and address this issue of the industry turning up at your door saying we have a right to. The Commissioner, Don Stiller, who was a grazier and an experienced negotiator, started developing tips and guides and providing one-on-one assistance to landowners. Water and salt, ensuring that groundwater used for agriculture and by community is totally protected. Ian Haler heads this portfolio and is an irrigator and a groundwater specialist and went about promoting groundwater information and research. Science and research, developing relationships with agencies and organisations to share knowledge and direct research into the onshore gas industry and its associated issues. Professor Steve Rain, an experienced soil and irrigation scientist and head of the Institute of Agriculture and the Environment at University of Southern Queensland. He set about engaging with the science community and produces technical papers on a range of groundwater and other topics. Local government and infrastructure, guiding local governments to better plan and manage the impact and upgrades to services and infrastructure. Ray Brown, the Mayor of Western Downs, headed this portfolio, which is in the heart of the gas industry. He provided a voice for local government on roads and other vital community infrastructure and impacts, of which there are many. Community and business, which was probably where we are absolutely mostly now, in making sure that there is a legacy for these communities. This was about improving the long-term sustainability of regional communities by maximising opportunities for business in the onshore gas industry. Headed by Shane Charles, the chair of the Economic Development Group at Toowoomba, and it went about engaging with local businesses and community to help position the long-term opportunities for these businesses in the industry. Gas industry development was about driving greater transparency in the onshore gas industry and ensure it is governed by rigorous standards and codes. Rick Wilkinson heads this, worked in the gas industry across the world and is the Chief Technical Officer, and went about improving the transparency of the industry with one great initiative. It's called the Queensland CSG Globe, in which you can log on to a site which shows you where every bore and every well is in that basin out there. And that can be done by any one with a smartphone or a computer. So what have we learned in Queensland that could be of help to the landowners and resource industry here? Can I say it's not been an easy road? And ask my wife how hard it's been. But we're not there yet. We have laid a groundwork for agriculture and the gas industry to work with each other towards a mutually beneficial coexistence. Like any business relationship, it requires constant attention and goodwill from all parties. Problems will not disappear altogether, but if the relationship is sound, most problems can be resolved. Here are my 6 takeaways to leave with you today. Land access. To me, it is a business-to-business relationship. A robust and trustworthy regulatory framework, and I emphasise the word trustworthy. You can have all the bureaucratic regulatory programs in the world. If people don't trust them, then they don't meet their commitment. The industry must understand all the impacts to the community, and I talk about the whole community. Facts, not emotion, must rule the debate, and to do this you need trusted science on water and geology. And the old elephant in the room, effective communication. All of the above has no impact or no benefit or no result whatsoever without an enormous effective communication. Leverage of legacy opportunities for all the local communities, which I've spoken about. I'll just run through those. The first lesson I point to about land access is the business-to-business relationship. You as a landowner are the key to enabling resources to be developed on behalf of your community. Just think about that. And that means getting the right process for companies to have access to your land. The Queensland Land Access Code, developed in 2010 from nothing, in consultation with the rural and resources sector, set out basic principles for resource companies to follow in entering private land, and they are basic principles. In addition to the principles under the code, there are some common sense grounds, not very common sometimes. A business-to-business type approach is fundamental. That means treating the relationship like any other business relationship. It also means getting to know each other's business. Queensland has travelled some distance since those conflicted riddle days of 2010. As of 2015, approximately 2,200 landowners with CSG infrastructure on their property have negotiated about 5,000 conduct and compensation agreements. 2,200 landowners, 5,000 agreements. Can I just say that none of those agreements have been settled in the Land Court? Not one. Compensation paid under these agreements is estimated to total about $238 million directly to the landowners. Individual amounts can range from small payments for minor works up to over $1 million for major gas field developments on some properties. There are also other sorts of compensation, such as being renewed fences, new roads, grids, sale of gravel and water, and other property improvements. In some areas, landowners have gained access to treated CSG water to put to beneficial use on their properties, and there is a significant number of properties now with major centre pivot operators. The second lesson is for a robust regulatory framework, of which we've just heard about. Queensland framework covers all aspects of the industry, including tenure requirements, project approvals, land access, environmental management, including groundwater, health and safety and social impacts. The state has also worked to build relationships between government regulators and landowners and the industry. We have a coal seam gas compliance unit within the Department of Natural Resources in mind, which responds to landowners' concerns, gathers the facts and liaises with the companies. It also undertakes audits of gas company activities and infrastructure, one of the more successful parts of the regulatory framework. The groundwater team in this unit works with the groups of landowners across the Surat Basin to monitor their water bores and help improve their knowledge of local geology and groundwater. Sometimes when relations break down between landowners and company, there is a need for intervention by a third party. The Commission often works in this space, bringing parties together to work through issues and find solutions. Thirdly, the industry must understand all of the impacts it has. The immediate impacts of the industry on the landscape are very obvious: wells, pipelines and other infrastructure. But for local communities, the issues are much broader, and they can be anything from dust to noise to roads to traffic to privacy, which is something that people generally don't think about till it's there, security, drains on community infrastructure, such as town waters and waste and sewage management. The industry needs to engage with local government early in the process, and councils working through these issues with industry can reap many benefits to the communities. For example, in the heart of the Surat Basin CSG industry, the Western Downs and the Maranoa councils have seen industry contribute hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade roads and other community infrastructure over recent years. Facts, not emotion. Trusted science in geology and water. I can't stress enough the need for keeping up to date with the facts about groundwater. There is a wealth of scientific research that underpins the onshore gas industry, in particular research into the impacts on groundwater. However, the general community cannot get easy access to this information. One of our Commissioner's key roles is sharing this information about science through fact sheets and technical papers and our website. In Queensland, the Office of Groundwater Impact Assessment, another critical element in the development of this industry, oversees the research and models and monitors the groundwater impacts across the basin. This includes forecasting impacts on landowners' bores in the region. This organisation is about to release an updated regional groundwater model for public consultation based on the research and modelling of the past 3 years. This will continue to help predict potential future impacts on individual landowner bores as the CSG industry develops. Effective communication and engagement. Nothing can be achieved with any of the above without effective and meaningful communication between individual gas companies and directly affected landowners, between gas companies and directly affected communities, between the onshore gas industry in general and the broader community and the onshore gas industry. The companies have come a long way with their communication with the first two groups. Unfortunately, the industry as a whole has been much slower to address the communication needs of the broader community. Here in the Northern Territory, cattle industry, I'm sure you know the perils of communication that targets an industry, as you experienced with the first hand with the 2011 live export ban. When I was involved in AgForce in the early 2000s, we initiated And Every Family Needs a Farmer, a community education program about farmers and where their food comes from. This campaign lifted the profile of farmers among city residents to one of the top 3 respected professions, and I hope it is still there. The gas industry needs to spend a lot more time explaining to consumers how their energy is produced and delivered safely and sustainably, and how it is an important part of their everyday life. I've called this the barbecue test. What people are thinking and saying about the gas industry while enjoying a prime cooked steak on their gas-fired barbecue with family and friends. The barbecue test is applicable in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, in Darwin or Katherine, or here in Alice Springs. Finally, business and communities need to be informed and involved. The industry has gone through its construction boom in Queensland, but that does not mean the end of opportunities for local businesses and communities. In 2014-15, largely after the boom of construction had finished, total direct spending by the industry was $10.6 billion. This included direct wages and purchases and local community contributions. Over 3,500 Queensland businesses benefited, including 1,000 local businesses based in the Surat Basin in towns like Roma, Miles, Chinchilla, Dalby and Toowoomba. While the major construction phase is now completed, the CSG industry will continue to drill and maintain wells to produce sufficient quantities of gas to fill the pipelines and the LNG boats. Over the coming decades, the major gas operators in the Surat Basin expect their combined spend per year to be over $1 billion in each of the ongoing Gasfield development, operations and maintenance. This is equivalent to the cost of building the North East gas interconnector that we hear a lot about to connect the Northern Territory to Australia's East Coast gas market via Mount Isa every year. Anecdotally, we have seen other encouraging trends. Unemployment in the Darling Downs Marinara region was 2.5% at the end of December last year, which is one of the best in regions in Australia. The number of enrolled residents in the Western Downs have risen by 10% over the last 8 years, bucking the trend of population decline for most of rural Australia. Something dear to my heart, and much more importantly, the gas industry has now created opportunities for young bush kids to get a job and have a career in their own community outside agriculture. In conclusion, the Northern Territory has begun its own journey towards coexistence with landowners and the onshore industry. You have some foundations in place: a regulatory framework, recommendations of a public inquiry into fracturing, general agreement between NTCA and APPEA around land access matters. Hopefully some of the Queensland learnings in Queensland can value add to these. In finishing, I would like to share a short video of one of Queensland's grazing farmers, Peter and Nikki Thompson from Echo Hills near Roma. The Thompsons have been pioneers in negotiating and coexisting with coal seam gas industry over the last decade, and the ABC went and visited them last October.
Echo Hills is rich farming country about 500 kilometres northwest of Brisbane. It produces grain, beef and coal seam gas.
To us, it's now part of our landscape, so we definitely don't see it as an eyesore.
Farmer Peter Thompson says he's built a good working relationship with CSG operator Origin Energy over the past 12 years.
I won't say for 1 minute it was easy. It was a long, difficult process.
Origin has 40 wells, 70 kilometres of flow lines and 2 water stations on the Thompsons' properties. And for that, they pay the family $320,000 in compensation each year. The CSG money allows the family to employ more workers, is a buffer during leaner years and will help fund their dream of preserving 2,000 hectares of brigalow forest for ecotourism.
And you're not at all concerned that the water and the land might be polluted by CSG?
We can only go on our own experience here. This creek has had treated, cleaned up CSG water released in here for, I think it's nearly 8 years now. It still is full of fish, full of turtles, full of frogs.
The Thompsons have negotiated the placing of certain wells and have set clear boundaries. Origin Energy built this main farm road, but is now banned from using it because it breached agreed conditions.
We're learning all the time, and neither of us really believe we have the answers. All we can do is be mindful and responsible for our little piece of the dirt of this planet that we are fortunate to be here to steward.
Everyone is different, every situation is different, and I find with the benders, I mean, that's an incredibly sad situation.
But Nikki and Peter Thompson hope their experience shows collaboration can be possible.
We need the protest groups to rattle the cages, but the other side of it is, righto, we've rattled the cages, now how are we going to move forward?
Because CSG extraction isn't about to stop anytime soon. Dominique Schwartz, ABC News.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I certainly look forward to any questions, but can I just reiterate about I will do whatever I can to see that you don't have to go through some of what we did. I chose to do this from my concern of both rural decline and opportunity, and I'm not sorry I did it, and I would be delighted to help in any other way we can. But thank you for your time today, and thank you to Tom and Tracy for the invitation. Thanks very much.